Jason Taylor, a talented South African graduate, uncovers a dark conspiracy within a major tech company, risking his life to expose corruption, murder, and systemic prejudice while fighting for justice and survival. Before we dive into this gripping story, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Jason Taylor had always been a dreamer. Raised in the rugged streets of Cape Town, South Africa, he had always known that his path to success would not be easy. Jason's mother, Amina, had worked tirelessly to provide for him after the sudden death of his father, a hard-working teacher who died tragically young. Amina sacrificed everything for her son's future, and when Jason received a scholarship to study in the United States, it felt like his life was about to change forever. Jason was no stranger to hardship. His mother had raised him alone in a small apartment, and they had never known true financial security. But they survived, and Jason became accustomed to doing whatever it took to push forward. He studied diligently, believing that if he worked hard enough, he could change his circumstances and rise above the struggles of his upbringing. When Jason arrived in America, he was met with the gleaming promise of opportunity. But soon he realized that the world was not so welcoming. The challenges were different, subtle, systemic, and deeply ingrained. Jason had worked hard to get to the United States, but here, despite his intelligence and ambition, he often felt like an outsider. He persevered, though, graduating with honors in computer science. His next challenge was finding a job. The tech industry was his dream, but the more he searched for a position, the more it seemed that he was being rejected for reasons beyond his qualifications. Companies were quick to praise his resume, but slow to offer opportunities. He faced racial barriers he hadn't anticipated, and the frustration mounted. Yet one email changed everything. Vantage Tech, a high-profile tech company in California, invited him for an interview. For Jason, this was the opportunity to finally prove his worth. The day of the interview, Jason dressed in his best suit, dark blue, tailored to perfection. He had spent weeks preparing, ensuring that every detail of his pitch was flawless. Vantage Tech's office was sleek, modern, and intimidating. Jason was led to a conference room where he met three interviewers: Greg, a middle-aged man with graying hair; Sarah, a woman in her early 30s; and Michael, a young tech expert who seemed more approachable than the others. The interview began with typical questions: his background, his experience, and his interest in the position. Jason spoke confidently, detailing his years of hard work and the innovative projects he had completed during college. The interviewers nodded, impressed by his answers. But then the questions began to change. "So, Jason?" Greg asked. "Where are you from?" "I'm from Cape Town, South Africa," Jason replied, trying to maintain his composure. Sarah's eyes flickered with something Jason couldn't place. "That's interesting," she said. "How do you think that will affect your ability to fit in with our company culture?" Jason hesitated. "I believe my diverse background gives me a unique perspective. I've been exposed to many cultures growing up in Cape Town, and I think that diversity will make me an asset here." Greg raised an eyebrow. "And how do you think you'll adjust to a predominantly American, mostly white workforce?" The question stung, but Jason kept his cool. "I've worked in diverse teams before, and I believe I adapt well. My focus is on the work and the people I collaborate with." The interview continued, but the questions became increasingly uncomfortable, probing his race more than his skills. Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was being judged not on his merits, but on his skin color. By the time the interview ended, he was exhausted, but hopeful. Perhaps he was overthinking it. Maybe it was just nerves. But 2 days later, the rejection letter arrived. 2 days after the rejection, Jason was sitting at his desk when his phone rang. It was a private number. His heart skipped a beat. He thought about the rejection, but this was different. This call was from his stepfather, Thomas Sullivan, the CEO of Vantage Tech. "Jason, I need to see you. It's urgent," Thomas said, his voice heavy with something unspoken. Jason was confused. His stepfather had always maintained a professional distance, never interfering in his career. Why was he calling now? But he agreed to meet Thomas at his office. When Jason arrived, he found Thomas looking unusually frail, the usual warmth replaced by an air of concern. There was a seriousness in his stepfather's eyes that Jason hadn't seen before. "Jason, I've been keeping something from you," Thomas began, his voice shaky. "I'm the owner of Vantage Tech." Jason froze. "What?" "I'm the one who owns the company, Jason," Thomas confessed. "And I've just found out something disturbing. The decision to reject you wasn't because you weren't qualified. It was because of your race. They rejected you because you were the only black applicant." Jason's breath caught in his throat. This couldn't be happening. His stepfather had known, and he had kept silent. Jason's mind raced. "You mean you didn't tell them to hire me?" "No, Jason, I didn't want to interfere. But I've been wrong. I've tried to change the system from the inside, but it's more entrenched than I realized. I've made mistakes," Thomas said, his voice filled with regret. Jason's chest tightened. "So? This whole time, I've been rejected because of the color of my skin?" Thomas nodded, his expression full of sorrow. "There's more, Jason. Vantage Tech isn't just a company. It's part of something much darker, something deeper. It's involved in illegal activities, and your rejection is just the tip of the iceberg." Jason's mind was spinning. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Thomas leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "There are people inside the company, powerful people, who control everything. They've been involved in insider trading, embezzlement, and worse. And I've been part of it all." Jason stared at him, stunned. His stepfather, the man he had trusted, was caught in something he could barely comprehend. "Dad, you're saying the company is involved in criminal activities?" Thomas nodded. "Yes. And I've been trying to gather evidence for years, but it's risky. These people are dangerous, Jason. They'll do anything to protect their secrets." As Jason delved deeper into the situation, he realized that his stepfather's involvement in these criminal activities wasn't just a passive one. Thomas had been part of a vast network, one that included some of the most powerful tech moguls and financiers in the world. But now his stepfather's health was deteriorating. He had been battling cancer for months, and the pressure of the secrets he had kept was weighing heavily on him. Jason's mind raced. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a fight for the truth, for justice. If he wanted to expose the truth about Vantage Tech and its shady dealings, he would have to navigate a world filled with corruption, violence, and powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to protect their empire. One night, as Jason sifted through old files Thomas had kept hidden, he stumbled upon a disturbing discovery, a set of documents linking Vantage Tech to a series of mysterious deaths over the past decade. The deaths were made to look like accidents, but Jason soon realized that the victims were whistleblowers, people who had tried to expose the company's illegal dealings. His blood ran cold. The company wasn't just corrupt, it was dangerous. As Jason sat back in his chair, reading through the chilling details of these crimes, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Another message from the unknown number. "You've seen too much. We're coming for you next." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. The time for caution was over. The battle wasn't just about a job, it was about survival. The next day, Jason went to the office, determined to uncover more about the dark side of Vantage Tech. But as he entered the building, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He wasn't alone. Someone was watching him. As he walked down the hallway, he was stopped by Sarah, one of the interviewers from his initial meeting. Her face was different now, tense, almost hostile. "Jason, we need to talk," she said, her voice low. Jason followed her into a private office, where she locked the door behind him. "What's going on?" Jason asked, his nerves on edge. "You're in over your head," Sarah whispered urgently. "I've seen the things you've been investigating. It's not just Vantage Tech, it's bigger than that. You have to stop now." Jason's heart raced. "What do you mean? What's bigger than this?" Before Sarah could answer, the office door slammed open. A man in a suit stepped inside, his eyes cold and calculating. "I think it's time we have a conversation, Jason," the man said, his voice smooth but dripping with menace. "You've been poking around where you shouldn't, and now we need to talk about your future, or rather, your lack of it." Jason's body tensed. The room had just become a trap. The man in the suit stepped further into the room, his presence as imposing as his cold demeanor. Jason's mind raced, trying to piece together who this person was and why he was there. He had seen this man before, during the interview at Vantage Tech. He remembered the way the man's eyes had lingered on him, the uncomfortable feeling of being scrutinized, assessed, not for his skills, but for something else. "Who are you?" Jason demanded, trying to steady his breath. "What do you want from me?" The man's lips curled into a thin, emotionless smile. "My name is Mason Carter. I'm the one who ensures things go smoothly at Vantage Tech. And I've been keeping an eye on you, Jason. You've been asking the wrong questions." Jason's chest tightened. He had no idea what Mason meant, but he could feel the weight of danger pressing in on him. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air in the room growing heavy with the threat of violence. "I'm not here to hurt you," Mason continued, his voice smooth and calculated. "I'm here to offer you a choice. Walk away, and you can keep your life. Keep digging, and you'll regret it. You've seen too much already, and there's no turning back." Jason stood his ground, his jaw clenched with determination. "You don't scare me," he said, though his voice betrayed the fear gnawing at him. "I'm not walking away. You think you can intimidate me into silence, but I know what you've done. I've seen the bodies. I've seen the cover-ups. I know about the deaths at Vantage Tech." The smile faded from Mason's face. "You think you know, but you don't. The truth is far darker than you can imagine. We have people everywhere, Jason. You've just crossed a line. You're not going to get out of this unscathed, but I'll give you one last chance to walk away." Jason took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Number, you're not going to scare me. I'm exposing everything. The world will know what you've been hiding." Mason's eyes narrowed. Without saying another word, he turned to leave. But before he opened the door, he looked back at Jason. "You'll regret this, Jason. You'll wish you'd never heard the name Vantage Tech." Jason's eyes locked onto his, and in that moment, he knew the man was serious. The stakes were higher than ever, and the threats weren't empty ones. But there was no turning back. Jason had already seen too much. He wasn't going to let them silence him. As Mason walked out, Jason heard the door click shut behind him. The tension in the room was palpable. Jason stood still for a moment, his mind spinning. His stepfather's words echoed in his mind. "They'll stop at nothing to protect themselves." He glanced at Sarah, who was watching him closely, her face pale. "You have to get out of here, Jason," she urged, her voice shaky. "This isn't just about the company. These people are dangerous. They'll kill you if they think you're a threat." Jason nodded, his mind already working. He needed to leave, but he couldn't go without the evidence. The documents that Thomas had shared with him were crucial, but they were scattered across several locations in the building. He couldn't trust anyone at Vantage Tech anymore. Not Mason, not Sarah, not even his stepfather. "Where do you keep the files?" Jason asked, his voice urgent. Sarah hesitated, glancing nervously at the door. "There's a server in the back office. I'll help you get to it. But you have to leave after that. If you don't—" "I know," Jason interrupted, his voice grim. "I know what's at stake." They moved quickly, navigating the hallways of Vantage Tech with cautious steps. Every sound, every creak of the building made Jason feel like someone was following them. As they approached the back office, Jason's thoughts were a blur. He needed to find the files that could expose everything: the illegal activities, the deaths, the conspiracy. But even more than that, he needed to survive. Sarah unlocked the door to the back office, and Jason stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, filled with rows of servers humming softly. Jason's heart raced as he made his way to the farthest corner, where he knew the files were stored. He quickly powered on the computer and started downloading the documents. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He glanced at Sarah, who was pacing nervously by the door, her eyes darting back and forth. "Are we almost done?" Sarah asked, her voice strained. "We can't stay here too long." Jason didn't answer. His fingers flew over the keyboard as the files downloaded. Time felt like it was standing still. Every second he spent in that office felt like an eternity. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. The power went out, plunging the room into darkness. Jason's heart stopped. He quickly pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to light the room. Sarah's face was illuminated in the faint glow, her eyes wide with fear. "What's happening?" she whispered. "I don't know," Jason said, his voice low. "But we need to move now." Suddenly, the door to the office burst open. Two men in suits stormed in, their faces grim. Jason's pulse raced. They had to be connected to Mason. They were here to stop him from escaping. "Jason Taylor," one of the men growled, "you're not going anywhere." Without thinking, Jason grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the back window. They had no choice but to escape. The documents were still on his phone, but the danger was too real. He couldn't stay here. As he smashed open the window and climbed out onto the ledge, the sounds of pursuit echoed from inside. The men were coming for them. "Go!" Jason shouted to Sarah, pushing her ahead of him. He heard footsteps closing in behind them, and his heart pounded in his chest. They ran down the alley, away from the building, their footsteps echoing in the night air. Jason's mind raced. He had the evidence, but he knew he couldn't trust anyone at Vantage Tech, or anyone connected to the company. Whoever was behind the scenes would stop at nothing to ensure their secrets stayed buried. "Jason, where are we going?" Sarah panted, looking around. "To the safe house," Jason replied, determination in his voice. He had a place where he could lay low and figure out what to do next. He needed to get the files into the right hands, someone who could help him expose everything. But as they turned the corner, Jason's phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. This time the message was clear. "We know where you are." Jason's breath caught in his throat. The hunt was on. Jason and Sarah ran through the darkened streets, their footsteps echoing on the cold pavement. Jason's phone buzzed again, sending a jolt through his body. He didn't need to look to know it was from the same unknown number. The message was simple and chilling. "We know where you are." Jason felt a sense of dread wash over him. He had to get out of the city, out of the reach of whoever was chasing him. The stakes had shifted from just a career to a fight for survival. They weren't just trying to silence him, they were trying to kill him. "Jason, we need to move faster," Sarah panted, glancing behind them nervously. The alley they had just sprinted down was empty, but Jason could feel the presence of danger in the air. "I know. I have a place we can lay low for a while," Jason said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping in. He had set up a small safe house months earlier, a place he could retreat to when things went wrong, when he needed to escape. He had never thought he'd be using it for something like this, but now it was their only option. They made their way through the winding streets, moving quickly and carefully. Jason kept his eyes on the phone, waiting for the next message, the next sign that they were being watched. But for now it was quiet. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the safe house, a small, unmarked building in a quiet part of town. It was run down, inconspicuous, perfect for someone who didn't want to be found. Jason opened the door and ushered Sarah inside, locking it behind them. The interior was sparse, just a few old chairs, a table, and a bed in the corner. Jason had kept it simple, not wanting to draw attention. He went to the back of the room where a small filing cabinet sat. He pulled out the papers Thomas had entrusted to him and plugged his phone into a laptop. "I'm going to send this to a few trusted people," Jason said, his voice cold and focused. "If I don't make it, at least someone will know the truth." Sarah sat down, her face pale. "Jason, do you really think they'll stop at nothing to silence you? Do you think we can expose them? This is bigger than just Vantage Tech, right? It's criminal." Jason paused, glancing at Sarah. Her fear was evident, but so was the determination in her eyes. She had helped him, risking her own safety to do so. He owed her more than just the truth. He owed her his survival. "We'll expose them," Jason said, the fire in his eyes returning. "But first, I have to make sure they can't find us. I won't stop until every last person involved is brought to justice." As Jason sent the files to several trusted contacts, journalists and activists he had met through his research and university, the room felt colder, darker. The weight of everything that had happened so far pressed heavily on him. The people who controlled Vantage Tech weren't just tech moguls. They were involved in human trafficking, money laundering, and worse. The deaths he had discovered were no accidents. They were part of a larger cover-up. Just as Jason finished uploading the files, his phone buzzed again. This time, he was expecting it. But the message that appeared on his screen was unlike any he had received before. "We've found you. You're not getting away this time." Jason's blood ran cold. He turned to Sarah, his voice low but urgent. "We need to move now." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of pounding footsteps outside the safe house made Jason freeze. Someone was coming. Jason quickly grabbed his backpack, stuffing the phone and a few important documents inside. He glanced at Sarah. "We're not safe here. We need to leave the city." Sarah nodded, her face pale but determined. "Where do we go?" "I have a contact in the city, a hacker who can help us trace these people. He might have information on who's behind all this," Jason said. "But it's risky. We'll have to stay off the radar." They moved quietly, creeping toward the back exit of the safe house. Jason pushed open the door, careful not to make a sound. The street outside was deserted, but he knew that wouldn't last long. The footsteps he had heard earlier weren't far behind. Jason led Sarah through a series of narrow back alleys, trying to keep them out of sight. His heart raced in his chest, but his mind was focused. Every decision he made now could be the difference between life and death. They had to stay ahead of whoever was after them. As they moved through the maze of alleys, Jason glanced over his shoulder, sensing that they were being followed. It wasn't just a feeling. He could hear the sound of footsteps, getting closer, faster. The people after him knew exactly where he was. "We need to make a run for it," Jason whispered, grabbing Sarah's hand. "We can't outrun them if we stay in these alleys. We're too exposed." They burst into the main street, weaving through traffic and crowds, hoping to lose their pursuers in the chaos. But the chase was far from over. They could hear the sound of a car's engine revving, tires screeching as it took off after them. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he and Sarah sprinted through the streets, dodging pedestrians and weaving around parked cars. The city's lights blurred around them, and Jason's mind raced. He had no plan, no backup, but he couldn't stop now, not when the truth was within his grasp. As they turned down another side street, Jason spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was one of his old university friends, Mark, a hacker who had helped him out with research in the past. Mark was standing near a cafe, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Mark!" Jason shouted, breaking through the crowd. Mark turned at the sound of his name, his eyes widening when he saw Jason. "What the hell is going on?" Mark asked, his voice filled with confusion and concern. "There's no time to explain," Jason said quickly, pulling Mark to the side. "I need your help. I've got evidence, proof of everything that's been going on. I need to make sure it's safe." Before Mark could respond, a car screeched to a halt at the end of the street. The door opened, and two men in black suits stepped out, scanning the crowd. Jason's blood ran cold. He knew these men. They were part of the team that had been hunting him. They were too close now. They had found him again. Jason's phone buzzed once more. Another message from the same unknown number. "You're not going to make it out of this alive, Jason. We've already won." Mark's eyes flicked between Jason and the approaching men. "You need to leave. Now I'll cover you. Just go." Jason hesitated, but he knew Mark was right. There was no time to argue. He turned to Sarah. "We need to go. Stay close." As they dashed down another alley, Jason felt the weight of what he was carrying, literally and figuratively. The truth was within his grasp, but the danger was escalating. Every corner, every street was filled with threats. The people behind Vantage Tech, the ones pulling the strings, weren't going to let him walk away. He had exposed part of the conspiracy, but now it was clear. They weren't just after the evidence. They were after his life, and they would stop at nothing to ensure their secrets stayed hidden. Jason and Sarah ran, their footsteps echoing through the narrow alleyways of the city, heartbeats synced to the pounding rhythm of the chase. The car was still following them, the sound of its engine growing louder with each passing second. Jason glanced over his shoulder, his breath shallow from exertion. The two men in black suits had nearly caught up to them, their figures now visible in the dim light. They couldn't keep running forever. "We need to get off the streets," Jason said, urgency in his voice. "There's a parking garage nearby. If we can get to it, we can lose them in the underground levels." Sarah nodded, her face pale but determined. "Lead the way." They veered off the main street, cutting through a narrow side alley that led to the parking garage. Jason's mind was working furiously, calculating their next move. Mark had told them he would cover for them, but Jason wasn't sure what that meant. He didn't have time to worry about that now. He had to focus on getting to safety. As they approached the entrance to the garage, Jason's phone buzzed again. This time, it was from an unfamiliar number, not the usual threatening one. "I have everything. Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks. You're running out of time." Jason's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The person who had been tracking him was finally making their move. But the message didn't give much information. Who was behind it? Was it an ally or a trap? "We have to go," Jason said to Sarah, his voice laced with urgency. "They know where we are. We need to make sure the files are in safe hands. There's someone who can help." Sarah's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. They sprinted toward the warehouse district, where the old abandoned buildings loomed like ghosts from the past. Jason had been here before. He had worked with underground hackers in the city during his university days. This was the place where secrets were traded and where people like him could disappear. When they arrived at the warehouse, the door creaked open, and Jason's eyes darted around the darkened interior. The space was vast and empty, save for a few scattered crates and old machinery. There was no sign of anyone. "Jason, are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. "This feels like a trap." "I know," Jason said, his mind racing. "But we don't have a choice. We have to trust someone, and this is our best shot." They stepped further into the warehouse, their footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. Suddenly, a voice from the shadows called out, "Jason!" Jason froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was Mason Carter, the man who had threatened him at Vantage Tech. He stepped out from behind a stack of crates, a smirk on his face. He wasn't alone. A few other men, armed and ready, flanked him. Jason's heart pounded. This was it. He had walked right into their trap. "You've been poking around where you shouldn't, Jason," Mason said, his tone dark and mocking. "You think you can expose Vantage Tech? Think again." Jason's mind raced. He knew that they had been tracking him, but he hadn't expected them to bring an entire team to deal with him. This was more than just corporate espionage. It was a fight for survival. "You'll never get away with this," Jason said, trying to stay calm. "The truth is already out there. It's too late to hide." Mason chuckled. "You really think people care about some files? We've already covered our tracks. But you're a loose end, and we don't let those live." Before Jason could react, the sound of a gunshot rang out, followed by a sharp pain in his side. He staggered, falling to the ground as blood stained his shirt. Sarah screamed, but Jason could barely hear her over the ringing in his ears. Mason's men moved in, their guns aimed at Jason. But just as Jason thought his world was closing in on him, the sound of a car screeching to a halt outside the warehouse filled the air. A door slammed open, and Mark, the hacker who had helped him before, rushed inside, flanked by several armed people, some of them from the underground network he had worked with. The warehouse suddenly erupted into chaos as gunfire rang out in all directions. Jason's vision blurred, but he managed to see Mark fire a shot, taking down one of Mason's men. The rest of the team engaged in a brutal firefight. It was clear that Mark had come prepared. "Jason, stay down!" Mark shouted as he made his way toward him, firing another shot that took down another of Mason's men. "Mark! The files!" Jason gasped, clutching his side, trying to stay conscious. "I've got them," Mark said, pulling out the thumb drive that Jason had loaded the evidence onto. "It's over, Jason. We'll make sure this sees the light of day." With the help of Mark's team, the battle inside the warehouse raged on. Jason could barely keep his eyes open, the blood loss draining his strength. The next few moments were a blur, screams, gunshots, and the sound of fists hitting flesh. But in the end, Jason's side won. Mason and his men were taken down, the warehouse was cleared, and the files, the damning evidence of the criminal activities within Vantage Tech, were safely secured. Jason woke up in a small, dimly lit room, an IV in his arm, and a bandage wrapped tightly around his side. He groaned, his body sore from the fight and the injuries he had sustained. When he opened his eyes, he saw Sarah sitting beside him, her face etched with concern. "Hey, you're awake," Sarah said softly, her voice full of relief. "How are you feeling?" Like I got hit by a truck, Jason muttered, trying to sit up. What happened? Is it over? Sarah nodded. It's over, we did it. The files got out. Mark and his team made sure everything was handed over to the right people. It's all going public now. Vantage Tech's dark side is exposed for the world to see. Jason's heart swelled with a mix of relief and exhaustion. They had won. The truth was out there, and the people responsible for the deaths, the cover-ups, and the corruption were finally being held accountable. It's not over yet, though, Jason said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. There are still others out there, but we've taken down the biggest piece of the puzzle. Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with pride. We did it, Jason. You did it. You fought for what was right. Jason nodded. I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah. As they sat there, the weight of everything that had happened slowly lifted from Jason's shoulders. He had been through hell, but he had come out on the other side stronger. He had exposed the truth, and now justice would be served. Months later, Jason stood at the forefront of a new company, one that was founded on the principles of transparency, fairness, and equality. The fallout from the Vantage Tech scandal had been massive, but Jason had used the momentum to create something that would change the tech industry for good. He had fought for his future, for justice, and for the truth, and in the end, he had won.